really there is nothing much that the speakership can do once the matter lands in the Senate. But you've been heard loud and clear, Honorable Yap. So let's therefore proceed. So then I put the question, order. Order. You must freeze like in the fridge. Order. So then I put the question, having confirmed that we have the numbers, both within and without the chamber, that the Land Amendment Bill, National Assembly Bill number 54 of 2019, be now read a third time. Will as many as of that opinion say aye? Aye. Many as of a contrary opinion say nay? The ayes have it.
A bill for an act of parliament to amend the Land Act.
Very well, then we go to the next order.
Order number 10, the Narcotic, Drugs and Psychotropic Substances Control Amendment Bill, National Assembly Bill number 27 of 2020, second reading.
Yes, this one we are resuming debate, which was interrupted on Tuesday, May 11, 2021, in the afternoon sitting. I can see there is not too much interest in it, so I believe we should be finishing this thing quickly. Yeah, so do I see any interest? I don't see any interest. So therefore, can I call the mover to respond? Yes. Proceed. The mover.
Thank you, Honorable Speaker. And Honorable Speaker, let me start by thanking all members who have contributed and those who have suggestions to enrich the provisions of this amendment bill, and that during the committee of the whole House, I expect that if there are any amendments or additional clauses, the members will bring them across for processing by this House. Honorable Speaker, it is good to note that the framework which was set for combating abuse of narcotics, drugs, and psychotropic substances is contained in the Act of 1994. But despite that, we have seen several times the same substances pass through our country. This bill, Honorable Speaker, then seeks to seal those loopholes that have been experienced though the Act is in place. Honorable Speaker, it is important to note that the enhanced provisions in the current bill is to do with punishment of those who handle narcotics or illicit drugs. Also, the fines that will emanate from the Act will be enhanced to make sure that it's punitive enough for people to fear to deal with them. Also, Honorable Speaker, to also make sure that those who assist, officers who assist in drug trafficking or concealing of those who are trafficking are going to be punished to the extent even of losing their jobs. Honorable Speaker, it also speaks to the issue of those who are dealing with the drugs outside Kenya by way of providing for information sharing between the Kenya government and foreign governments. Speaker, it's also good to note that people are hiding behind privacy information, but this is now addressed here to limit that right to privacy so that information that is going to be shared on the issue of narcotics, especially for traffickers, can be exposed. Honorable Speaker, this bill, therefore, is so timely. I know members are quite interested. I have heard and listened to the contribution by the Deputy Majority Whip and also the member for Dagoretti South on the issue of the medicinal value of some of those substances like marijuana and industrial hemp. I expect to engage them further during the consideration of committee of the whole House to consider if they have any amendments that are going to be beneficial to our people here in this country. So while thanking members, I'll also urge them to put in place and submit any additional amendments to enhance the bill. So with those many remarks, Honorable Speaker, I beg to reply.
Very well. Let me confirm the numbers now. Again, I see quite a number of members have gone out now shortly. Yes. Now I confirm that there are a few other members outside in the alternative chamber outside there. So therefore, I'll proceed and put the question, which is that the Narcotic Drugs and Psychotropic Substances Control Amendment Bill, National Assembly Bill number 27 of 2020, be now read a second time. Will as many as of that opinion say aye? And those of a contrary opinion say nay? The ayes have it.
A bill for an act of parliament to amend the Narcotics, Drugs and Psychotropic Substances Control Act and for connected purposes. Order number 11, the Assisted Reproductive Technology Bill, National Assembly Bill number 34 of 2019, second reading.
Very well. That one is supposed to be moved by the Honorable Millie Odhiambo Mbona.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, for giving me this opportunity. Mr. Speaker,
I'm very surprised that when I said that, many people quickly corrected me. I do not know how. Okay, let's
Mr.
proceed.
Speaker, Mabona is very important. So because I already have, I think, 4 or 5 names, it becomes a 6. Millie Grace Akoto Diambo Mabona.
Proceed.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, for giving me this opportunity. Mr. Speaker, I don't know, with your kind permission, if I can lower, because I'm speaking for a bit. My mask? Thank you.
Honorable Millie.
I was requesting whether I could lower my mask because I'm going to speak for a while.
Well, we have agreed as a House that we will still listen to you and hear you well, even with the masks. I really do not know. Let's proceed with the mask. I mean, you are very close to the member for Nairobi there.
Thank you.
And
it's a bit of a challenge, but it's okay. I'll try. Mr. Speaker, thank you for giving me this opportunity. And Mr. Speaker, I move that the Assisted Reproductive Technology Bill, National Assembly Bill number 34 of 2019, be read a second time. Mr. Speaker, this is a bill that seeks to provide for the regulation of assisted reproductive technology, to establish an assisted reproductive technology authority, to make provision in relation to children born of assisted reproductive technology processes, and for connected purposes. Mr. Speaker, maybe I could give a little bit of a background. That, Mr. Speaker, there are several cases that have gone to the court that deal with issues of assisted reproduction. And Mr. Speaker, maybe I can explain the issue of assisted reproduction is that we have instances where couples are not able to get children naturally. You find people who have been married 20 years, 30 years, and have been trying to have children and are totally unable. Mr. Speaker, currently in Kenya, assisted reproduction is not illegal, it is not unlawful, but there is no legal framework. So what ends up happening is a lot of couples go and seek medical assistance. They are able to get children, but then the children are not recognized legally. What then they have been forced to do is to go to court for the court to declare their own children their children. And sometimes it's even complicated, where you find that a mother, especially in cases of surrogacy, where a mother carries a child for another woman to term, and then because they have really bonded, they change their minds and now want their child as their own. So then we actually make the courts have the challenge and problem of dealing with those cases because they are not regulated by any law or any regulation. So it's a free fall. Everybody does what they want. People charge any fees they want. Patients can be abused in the process because there is no legal framework. The High Court requested Parliament to come with a legal framework to assist in issues of assisted reproductive technology, Mr. Speaker. And therefore, this law seeks to fill that void that the court has talked about. Mr. Speaker, as a Christian, I know there may be moral, ethical issues that may be raised. And Mr. Speaker, one of the things that I'm seeking to do is to address the moral, ethical issues, because we cannot bury our sons because the issue of assisted reproduction technology is going on, but it's not regulated. I have read the Bible, Mr. Speaker, both the Old and the New Testament, and there is really nothing in the Bible that precludes assisted reproduction technology. Mr. Speaker, in the olden days, because we didn't have technology, people like Sarah Abraham decided to use the traditional process and got a woman for a husband, and that created conflict. Mr. Speaker, we know of women who cried to the Lord for years because they were not able to have children like Hannah, and God remembered them. Mr. Speaker, we are living in days when our faith may not be as strong as the Hannahs and the Sarahs of the Old Testament that could pray for until the 100 years and have children. And Mr. Speaker, I want to declare my interest because I do not have a child. I have not gone through the process of assisted technology because of lack of a legal framework. And Mr. Speaker, and that's why I'm saying and declaring my interest. Mr. Speaker, I want to say, other than the court, I want to give my own personal experience of this issue. That I came to this parliament when I was fairly still young, of a reproductive age. I didn't even think much about whether or not I'm having children. And the first salvo that was thrown at me when I wanted to vie for a parliamentary seat was that I cannot lead because I'm a Lur. Lur in my language means a barren woman. And Mr. Speaker, you know, that's not a terminology. People even ask me how I mention it, because it's a terminology that people don't talk about. It is stigmatized. It is looked down upon. And I want to thank God for bringing me in this house at such a time as this for a purpose, that I may be able to speak on behalf of thousands of women who cry and who mourn in their houses and who have been divorced because they don't have children. Mr. Speaker, you have seen when I have a political disagreement with some male leaders, not MPs, like when I had a disagreement with Honorable Sonko. What he told me is I should not speak until I've opened my legs and given birth, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I am a leader and I'm a strong woman. What about another woman who may not be as strong as me, and who is being derided, and who is being looked down upon, and who is about to be chased from her home because she's not able to open her legs and have a child? Mr. Speaker, I have seen in my own constituency that when I have public meetings, people will address me by categories. And I know that the issue of HIV and AIDS has been very stigmatized. Yet, Mr. Speaker, when I address the public, people will address me by their various categories. The women who are HIV positive, after I speak, people will come and say, we are the farmers, we are the fishermen, we are this and we are that. And the women who are HIV positive and who are on ARVs will stand up, Mr. Speaker, and they will tell me, Mr. Speaker, that we also want our voices to be heard because we are what is called Jondilo. Jondilo are the ones who swallow. They are not ashamed to say that they are on ARVs because they have HIV. And Mr. Speaker, because HIV, I'm giving the example of HIV, because it's one of the most stigmatized diseases. Yet, Mr. Speaker, one of the common things I have seen, that the women who have no children will not raise their voices because they are too embarrassed. They will hide and come and see me after everybody has gone, and they will whisper so that others don't hear. And they'll tell me, Mheshimiwa, we are low like you. We are barren like you. We don't have a voice. And Mr. Speaker, I am here to speak on behalf of all the lords in this country. Mr. Speaker, I was amazed at the number of women who have since come to me, not just women, but even men. When I brought this bill in the last parliament, about 3 male members of parliament came to me and told me they've had their children through assisted reproduction and it saved their marriage. Mr. Speaker, Honorable Joyce Lay, who was a member of this House, broke down and cried when she narrated her story of how she was not allowed to take her own child because the child was born of surrogacy, and it's the court who had to give her her child. Mr. Speaker, there's a woman member, I will not say who she is. If she wants, she can air her voice. She was not a member of parliament then. She called me before I brought this bill. Interestingly, even though I say I have an interest, but I brought this bill mainly because of the voices I heard from women. That woman called me and told me, Millie, can you please project our voices? I have gone through a horrendous time trying to have a child. Mr. Speaker, I am happy as we speak that she managed to get a child through assisted reproduction. And I also thank God she's now a member of parliament. I can see she's not here today, but I'm hoping that she will add her voice to this. A male member of parliament, in fact, he's not here, but he had told me he wanted to second this bill, has had triplets through assisted reproductive technologies. That is the reality. But not all the stories are rosy. When I brought this bill, a young woman, only 38 years, sent me a text and told me that, and hence, we should be looking at a wider level, and that's why we actually have this no longer as IVF, but assisted reproduction technologies bill. We have since actually had a discussion with them, and either them or I will be proposing even further amendments based on even further research and practices that we have seen in other countries. And I'm hoping and encouraging members that will support this bill so that not only should we then abide by the court order, but that we will help those who need our assistance. Mr. Speaker, just to take the members briefly through what the bill is about. Part 1 is preliminary, which of course, as usual, have short title, commencement, interpretation, and application. Then Part 2 establishes the Assisted Reproductive Technology Authority. That would be a body that regulates assisted reproduction. And Mr. Speaker, right now, because there is no law, the things that the church fears can actually happen because there's no legal framework. We can actually have people mixing human gametes with those of animals, which for me is also an ethical issue. So this authority will actually be setting up regulations on what and what cannot be done. It will also be a licensing body that will be enabling people who actually practice this assisted reproduction. Mr. Speaker, currently we do not have any regulation. So we have people doing anything, even people who are not experts. And a lot of desperate couples are exploited in the process. Mr. Speaker, Part 3 highlights prohibited activities. When and how you can use an embryo, how long you can keep an embryo. It's suggested that you can keep for 10 years. Consent of parties, so that you do not have somebody using your eggs or your sperms without your permission. that Mr. Speaker can decide that I've seen Mr. Speaker sitting there. He's handsome, he's brilliant, he can manage the house well, and I somehow go and find your sperms to then create a baby. Now, this law seeks to protect that, so that nobody uses your sperms or your eggs without your permission, except by law. Mr. Speaker, it also talks about posthumous consent, whether or not that should be allowed, and if it is to be allowed under what circumstances. Mr. Speaker, I know this is a moot issue because I've been talking to a lot of people. The issue of assisted reproductive technology for procreation purposes, I have actually provided that it should be for procreation purposes only. I know the scientists and the doctors that I spoke to had told me that we need to open it up because of the issue of technology and research. If we limit it, means we cannot do research. Like, for instance, when we have COVID, perhaps some of those researches that we may do may help us. Mr. Speaker, it also talks of circumstances for undertaking assisted reproductive technology, where it is precluded, when it is allowed, prohibiting the taking of gametes from a minor, except maybe if they are sick. Mr. Speaker, the use of gametes. Then, Mr. Speaker, it also talks about, in Part 4, the rights of parents, donors, and children. And what it seeks to do is to confer legal rights on the child so that you don't have to go to court for an order. Perhaps I want to say that what this bill seeks is to entrench what we call gestational surrogacy, as opposed to genetic or traditional surrogacy. What that means, Mr. Speaker, is there are times when there's a woman who cannot carry a child on their own, but you will use somebody else to carry a child for you. What this bill seeks is to ensure that the person who carries the child should not be the bearer of the eggs, because it tends to create legal issues. Because if I have my eggs and I am the one who is carrying the child, then it means when I give birth to the child, I'll insist, because I'm the biological parent, that that is my child. So what we are seeking is gestational, so that the mother who is carrying for the intended parents has no biological connection to the child. Again, that one I will let members decide whether they want that or whether they want to expand it. Mr. Speaker, the other issue that it seeks to deal with, which I know we have not included here, but after further discussions, I think I will bring further amendments, is the issue of national and international surrogacy. Mr. Speaker, if you look at, say, a country like the United States, that a lot of the states allow surrogacy, yet actually if you look at the price, it's very prohibitive. On the other hand, a country like Sweden is still grappling with the issue of surrogacy, but for very interesting issues. I was talking to one of the senior officers in their agency, and what they were saying, the reason why they were not allowing is because they were saying that relatives can abuse that and force their own relatives to carry the child for them when they really don't want. Like they were saying, I can psychologically force my sister when she may not want to carry a child for me. But here instead, Mr. Speaker, instead of then leaving it open, then we need to provide by law. That's why I'm talking about fixing it to gestational as opposed to traditional genetic surrogacy. But Mr. Speaker, when it comes to international, again, I will leave this House to give me direction even as members contribute, because one of the things that if we find it acceptable, then we can consider what we call medical tourism. The reason why we find India is really preferred by a lot of Kenyans because of the cost of a lot of their processes. When I did my research, I discovered that in the US, the process of surrogacy would be something between 7.5 million to 15 million on the prospective parents. But in Kenya, if you actually look at the costs that we are hoping will be undertaken, it may be much, but it may not be prohibitive. Again, the bill seeks not to entrench commercial surrogacy, but to entrench non-commercial surrogacy. Again, I would love to hear members' opinions over that. And what that means is that if you use a surrogate, then you don't commercialize the process, but you pay only the costs that are related to your carrying of the child. That therefore means if this woman will be carrying your baby for 12 months, you must make sure that they are staying in a residence that you would love your child to stay in. If she's carrying your child for 12 months, they must have nutrition that is suitable for them. If they are carrying the baby for 12 months, they may be able to access clinics and all the medical facilities. And also, if they are working and they've stopped working, that you should be able to balance or compensate for the period that they are not working because they are carrying your baby. What it prohibits is putting a price that I want a surrogate, how much does it cost to be a surrogate? 4 million, 2 million, so that people do not commercialize. And my thinking was, especially in a country where people are struggling, if you commercialize, then it is likely to be abused. But on the other hand, if we find a system that is friendly to Kenyans and even people who want to come from abroad, and with a proper legal framework, then others can come to Kenya for medical tourism that will then boost our economy. I know a lot of people have talked about the issue of trafficking. On the issue of surrogacy, it will actually stop trafficking so that we will no longer have miracle babies. If somebody were to carry your child and there's a legal framework, then we will be seeing and following this child for 9 months, not for 2 months like the miracle babies, where you then have children within 2 months. But we will know which facility you went to, because this law provides for all that, record keeping, which are of course then confidential. Mr. Speaker, again, I've also emphasized that it then talks about having very clear legal provisions about who the mother of the child is. Part 5 prohibits access to information except for valid legal reasons. Part 6 talks of licensing and the conditions for licensing and the conditions around which it can be suspended or stopped. And where the authority has gone beyond their powers, that you can appeal to the authority first and then to the High Court. Part 7 is general financial provisions, and Part 8 is miscellaneous provisions, which has offenses and general penalties. Mr. Speaker, I will stop at that and urge or ask Honorable Peter Owino to second. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Honorable Owino.
Thank you for the opportunity, Mr. Speaker. I rise to second the Assisted Reproductive Technology Bill, 2019 National Assembly Bill number 34 of 2019. Mr. Speaker, this is a bipartisan approach. That's why the Chair for Health asked me to support this bill. It's not women or men affair. The Assisted Reproductive Technology, Mr. Speaker, seeks to regulate rights and obligations relating to assisted reproductive technology. It aims to regulate the use of assisted reproductive technologies to aid individuals or couples that have challenges conceiving due to factors associated with infertility. Furthermore, Mr. Speaker, the bill aims to regulate the qualifications of health practitioners who administer assisted reproductive technology in order to protect recipients of the latter services. Mr. Speaker, pursuant to the provision of Article 118 of the Constitution of Kenya and Standing Order 127.3 of the National Assembly Standing Orders, The committee, through local daily newspapers on Monday 7 October 2019, published an advertisement inviting public to submit memoranda. Further, in the letter dated 5th of March 2020, the committee invited individuals and institutions to make presentation to this bill. Those who presented their memorandum, Mr. Speaker, include the Ministry of Health, Federation of Women Kenya Lawyers, FIDA, Family Health Options Kenya, FHOC, and the Kenya Medical Association. Also, the Center for Citizen Empowerment Program, PATH, Intersex Persons Society of Kenya, Kenya Obstetrics and Gynecologists Society, KOGS, and Christine Kipsang, who is an advocate. Mr. Speaker, the committee observed the following after having a lengthy discussion on this proposed bill. The Assisted Reproductive Technology Bill 2019 seeks to provide the regulation of assisted reproductive technology to prohibit certain practices in connection with assisted reproductive technology, and also to establish assisted reproductive technology authority, and to make provision in relation to children born in assisted reproduction technology process. Number two, we also observed, Mr. Speaker, that the principal object of the bill is to regulate rights and obligations relating to assisted reproductive technology. The bill also aims to regulate the use of assisted reproductive technologies to aid individuals or couples that have challenges conceiving due to factors associated with infertility. Furthermore, the bill aims to regulate the qualification of health practitioners who administer assisted reproductive technology. That is done in order to protect the recipients. Number three, Mr. Speaker, in addition, the bill contains provision that defines rights touching on, among others, issues relating to consents preceding assisted reproduction, like handling of embryos, which resulting from assisted reproductive technology. Also protecting the identity, status, welfare of children who are born of assisted reproduction. Lastly, it also have the duties of persons who undergo assisted reproduction and their legal status as parents. Number four, Mr. Speaker, the bill establishes an assisted reproductive technology authority to regulate the process, like licensing, standards, research, and infrastructure relating to assisted reproductive technology. The legislative scheme of this bill has been modeled in a manner that addressed the balance between the need to regulation of ethics and advancement of modern science and technology. However, Mr. Speaker, the committee noted that the Health Act 2017 enabled the Cabinet Secretary to establish directorate under the Ministry of Health to deal with the specific areas of health. In this regard, Mr. Speaker, and taking note for the need of rationalization of semi-autonomous state agency under the Ministry of Health, there were no sufficient reasons for establishment of the authority, as there were existing structures that could be realigned to take on the role of the authority, including the MOH Reproductive Health Unit. Mr. Speaker, number 6, the committee also observed that the bill lacked sufficient provision to deal with pertinent issues arising from assisted reproductive technology, such as the prohibition of commercial surrogacy, provision of compensation mechanisms, and also to ensure that service is not exploitative in nature. The need for prohibition of sex selection and the abandonment of children when they are born. Number 7, the Speaker, the committee also notes that Section 11 of the Births and Deaths Registration Act needs to be aligned with the proposed bill to allow the registration of children born of assisted reproduction by commissioning parents, as currently provided. Registration can only be undertaken with surrogate mother, and this has posed great challenge as the biological parents have to undertake the legal adoption process in order to be registered as parents. Number 8, these are committee observation. The committee finally noted that Senate was in the process of considering the Reproductive Health Bill 2019, whose objects is to provide for rights and reproductive health care, to set standards of reproductive health, also provide the right to make decisions regarding reproductive health, and for the connected purposes. But this bill seeks to provide legal framework for enforcement and implementation of reproductive health and assisted reproduction is one of the areas it touches. However, the National Assembly bill specifically deals with assisted reproduction and does not delve into the entire realm of reproductive health rights. In this regard, some memory health was not relevant. Mr. Speaker, I want to join. Sorry, it's a change of guard. Madam Speaker.
Yes, there's a change of guard.
Sorry, I didn't look up for long. From the Health Committee, Madam Speaker, we are pleased that the bill is before this House for the second reading. It is long overdue, and I wish to thank the originator and the committee for this bill. And as the originator have said, Madam Speaker, this, in many families, causes a social distress. It causes also economical distress because some families are paying too much in order to realize children. It can also go as well as having medical implications and relationships. One of the things that human being despises the most is rejection, which has been seen in many families. And as the originator said, Madam Speaker, we are in a global village, and many countries have structures and laws to guard this. The committee, however, at the committee stage, will have to do some amendments, especially on the international connections, commercialization of the activities versus compensation is very touchy. And also how we can hold account those who are recipients and not get away with the children who they are already contracted to bear for the 9 months and give birth to. So there are some gray areas which we implore all members to think around so that we can get together in form of amendment. But I think this is a good bill. It will bring dignity to both women and men in their families. It will also bring social order when it comes to the desires of family making. Right now, many families are broken. Many families, many are already divorced. Many are separated, and many are in traumatic circumstances because of the rejection phenomena, which I said earlier. So, Mr. Speaker, on behalf of my chair, Sabina Chege, and the entire committee, I want to say I support the bill. I second the bill.
Okay. Order, members. I therefore go on to propose the question, which is that the Assisted Reproductive Technology Bill, National Assembly Bill number 34 of 2019, be now read a second time. Honorable Kaki, you want to speak to this one? Okay.
Honorable Speaker, thank you for giving me this opportunity. I would like to also make a few comments in supporting this bill moved by the Honorable Millie Odhiambo Mabona. Honorable Speaker, I would like to just state that in the 11th Parliament, when I was Chair Health, the Honorable Millie Odhiambo made attempt also to push for this matter regarding assisted reproduction. So, Madam Speaker, I would like to say from the onset that I support this bill. I know that it is a bill that requires a lot of consultation so that matters to do with assisted reproduction can be done in an ethical way. But I would like to say that I really support it. Having looked at what the committee has been able to do, all the institutions that they were able to meet, from the Ministry of Health that has given its in-depth analysis to this bill, and also shown where there could be pitfalls, and there are suggested amendments that I believe are likely to come through the Departmental Committee on Lands. The county governments having interacted with it, different women organizations and institutions that seem to be supporting this bill also, but also offering their guidance on areas that need to be changed. The Kenya Medical Association, and in the 11th Parliament, Honorable Speaker, I remember that we had the Honorable Nyikal, who kept saying that this is a wonderful bill because assisted reproduction is happening in our own constituencies, in our villages, and in an haphazard way, that people make decisions and they agree and they implement, and at times it goes quietly. At times, when it comes to registration of these children, it happens with a lot of hidden information, where children are, where the registration officers just identify the mother, father, in a way that is not legal, but just to say that this is already happening, and it is important that we have a legal framework, as the Honorable Millie is saying. I listened to her as she gave her own account, and I would like to thank her very much for being forthright and straight, because there are many women who have reproductive issues, many who may not have the courage that the Honorable Millie Odhiambo has, giving herself as an example. And to say that, Madam Speaker, I know of so many women, young women in their 20s, in their 30s, who are struggling to have children. So this is a matter that needs to be taken up by this House. I've seen also an individual, Madam Speaker, a lawyer, who also went through this in depth and gave very strong recommendations. Madam Speaker, I have heard the mover and also the seconder talk about being careful about research in this area, because, Madam Speaker, this is an area that can also be highly misused, especially for the children who are born without a clear legal framework. Madam Speaker, I would also like to agree with the Honourable Millie that I think she was trying to give an example of exactly what is happening in her area, and I would like to say that within the Kamba community, assisted reproduction is happening on an old and traditional way, where if a mother does not have children, the lady is allowed by the family to bring another woman as a wife, in quotes. And then this woman, it now bears children on behalf of the woman. And Madam Speaker, with the current concerns and with the contemporary society, I think this is now going to be a bit too old and not easy to implement, and also with the current status of the economy. I would like to say that this bill, Honourable Speaker, is long overdue. As the Kamba community, we may not be able to continue with the Kaweto concept, where the woman bears children on behalf of the woman who cannot have children. So it is important that we get a legal framework as women of this country, that people can have children without having to go through the traditional approaches